This is the Quarter 4, Week 4 video notes on the civil rights movement. And our focus this year is going to be on the city of Alexandria itself and what that civil rights movement looked like here in the city. We're going to start off by talking about one of our most famous civil rights activists from the city of Alexandria. His name was Samuel Tucker. He attended the Parker Gray High School, which was the African-American high school at the time in Alexandria. This is the African-American high school. So at this time in Alexandria, the schools were segregated. So you had white schools and then you had schools for African Americans. After Samuel Tucker graduated from Parker Gray, he attended Howard University, which is in D.C., which is a historically Black college and university. And then after he left Howard, he went on to study law. And he did this independently, which was very impressive because by the age of 20, he passed the bar exam, which is what you need to become a lawyer. And just to give you guys a little bit of perspective, most individuals don't pass the bar exam until after they finish law school. So you go to 4 years of college after you graduate high school, then 3 years of law school. And then many individuals even study for the bar exam for a year after they get out of law school before they take it. So for most individuals, they're not taking the bar exam until they're in their mid-20s. So for him to pass it at age 20 is extremely impressive. And he represented African Americans in the city of Alexandria in criminal charges, but also in civil suits, and worked to create equality for them. And then he eventually became one of the leading lawyers for the NAACP in the state of Virginia. And the NAACP stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. In addition to that, he also led Americans' first sit-down strike. So in 1939, he used to pass the Alexandria Public Library and was never allowed in because the Alexandria Public Library was for whites only. And in 1939, he worked and asked for a group of individuals to go into the library. And so there was a group of 5 individuals that went into the 5 African Americans that went into the Alexandria Library, took a book and sat down and began to read. All 5 were arrested for even though they were sitting there quietly reading. And they were told that they were providing a separate library for African Americans. And in 1940 to the 1960s, the Robinson Library was opened, and this was the African American Library. And it's still part of Alexandria today. In 1954, Brown versus Board of Education was passed. Brown versus Board of Education overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. Remember, Plessy versus Ferguson said that separate is equal. And in 1954, that was overturned, saying separate was not equal. What this meant was that schools had to be desegregated. So you could no longer have a school for whites and a school for African Americans. You had to integrate all your schools. Now, integration was a huge problem in Virginia. It was very much ignored, and even outright prevented in some areas. And so we saw that play out in the city of Alexandria. So Virginia and the city of Alexandria both resisted desegregation. In fact, the governor and the mayor both threatened that they would close schools down if they desegregated. Many schools in the state of Virginia were shut down because they desegregated. We did not shut schools down in the state or in Alexandria. However, Alexandria very much resisted desegregating the schools. In 1958, 4 years after the Supreme Court ruled against segregated schools, so said that Alexandria needed to integrate their schools, 14 African American students requested transfers to white schools, and all of them were denied. And this is what Alexandria schools said to those 14 students. Specifically, one young woman who outperformed all of her peers in both the African American and white schools. So academically, based off of all the criteria the board had set, there was no reason to deny her transfer, but this is what the board said, why they denied her transfer. This girl, if admitted to the 6th grade of either Patrick Henry or William Ramsey, will be the only pupil of her race if enrolled. This will be a novel situation. Such a situation would constitute a disruption of established social and psychological relationships between pupils in our schools as they have previously operated. So therefore, this girl was denied admittance into the school. Now, finally, a year later in 1959, 9 of the 14 were allowed a transfer, but it was mandated by the courts because they said these 9 students meet the requirements set by the Board of Education, therefore they have to be admitted. And that's what this picture is up here. In 1963, we received a new superintendent by the name of John Albholm, and he really tried to work to desegregate ACPS. It did almost cost him his job. The school board did try to get him fired. He also created an honors program to try to prevent white flight as he desegregated schools. White flight means that white families were leaving urban areas and moving further out into the suburbs. And it wasn't until 1971 when TC High School had fully integrated grades 11 and 12. That was really the first true integration of ACPS was TC Williams, just the 11th and 12th grades. It took 14 years to start to implement Brown versus Board of Education in the city of Alexandria. And this did not go peacefully. Oops, that should say Brown versus Board of Education. Sorry, team. So it took 14 years. There was still a lot of violence. It wasn't uncommon between the 9th and 10th grades from the different schools to see violence erupt at those schools, between the schools themselves. Firebombing was happening. At GW High School, there was a cross burned in the front of the GW High School at the time. And so there was still a lot of violence and racial tension in this city, even after integration, even after, remember the Titans, TC Williams, all of that, we still saw a lot of racial tensions within this city. There is a little video that I included. It's a video clip. I highly recommend you watch it. It is not mandatory, but it also goes into more detail about the violence and desegregation in Alexandria City Public Schools. We do now have the Office of Human Rights in Alexandria that does work to try to prevent anybody being discriminated within the city of Alexandria. The Alexandria Human Rights Code was finally passed in 1975, and it prevents discrimination based on race, color, sex, religion, ancestry, national origin, marital status, family status, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, transgender status, or disability in housing, employment, public accommodations, health, social services, education, credit, or city contracts. So it's something important to know that the city works hard at this time to try to prevent any discrimination from happening. If you would ever feel that discrimination is happening in employment, housing, public accommodations, health, social services, education, credit, or city contractors, there is a link that you can go to file a complaint, and that link is right there below. You can also find this on the City of Alexandria's webpage, and that is there again to provide you with services and resources to prevent discrimination in the city.